Hello everyone, it's Shay here again from Pro EMP, and today I'm going to be using the Maschine Mk3 hardware to control Pioneer's Rekordbox DJ performance software. You understand that Maschine is a controller for its own software, the Maschine DAW, but Maschine is also a Midi controller in its own right and can be used to control other softwares that will receive Midi messages. Now luckily enough, Rekordbox gives you the option to do this. So up here within Rekordbox you have an open and close Midi settings window. Now if you open this, you can see that I have a connected device, which is my Maschine Mk3, but you have all of these different tables. So you have a decks panel, so all of the controls for each deck, 1 and 2, pads, effects, sampler, mixer, browser, other, which I don't have anything in yet, but I can add to later, and lighting effects. So if we go back to our deck here, you can see that all of these different parameters that I have in here are selected to deck 1 or deck 2, and the MIDI in and MIDI out are buttons or knobs or CC rotaries on the hardware. This is the same for the decks, the pads, the effects and the samplers. So within this software, you can control every single parameter with a MIDI CC message, which is what this is perfect for. The reason this came about is I used to DJ a long time ago before I got into production. DJing was my sort of foot into the world of production around about 12 to 13 years ago. And I started DJing on turntables and then onto CDJs and then onto controllers. And the last controller I had was a Pioneer DDJ SX2, which I loved. I thought it was brilliant. I took it everywhere with me. I gigged with it for around about 2 years. And then I stopped DJing because of family and concentrating more on the production side and the engineering side of things. But just recently I wanted to get back into DJing again, not for gain or financial gain, but for just the love of DJing and in my spare time. And I didn't really want to go out and buy another DDJ SX or something that was going to cost me between £500 to £1,000 just to control some DJ software. I already owned Pioneer's Rekordbox software, which I had all my tracks still in. But then I realised I've got a Maschine Mk3, which is a very good MIDI controller. I know that Rekordbox lets you map to it, so why not try making my own mapping? So I did. So let's talk you through this mapping. So how this works is I've tried to make this as visually like the Pioneer controllers as possible with the color arrangements and the pad arrangements. So let's talk through from top to bottom. So from the top here, I've got two screens, obviously from the Mark III's color screens. But how these work is the left screen has the controls around it for deck 1 and the right screen has the controls around it for deck 2. Now what I have on the top row of these buttons, I've got a play and a pause, a cue memory setting so I can set memory cues, and an auto loop. And the same again for deck 2. Play, pause, cue memory set, and auto loop. At the bottom here, the rotaries control the EQ for deck 1 and the deck 1 fader. So I've got the high EQ, the mid, and the low, and then a deck fader. And the same for deck 2, high, mid, low, and a fader. My crossfader is my touch strip. I rarely use this because I mostly use the faders, the channel faders, but this is here if I want to do quick chops and things like that. So this is the first page. I have 2 pages here. So my first page is my EQ and faders. If I bank along to my second page of settings, this is now effects for deck 1 and effects for deck 2. So I've got a reverb on, off, a delay on, off, and a jet on, off. On the hardware, you press the button, and on the software, it responds on and off. And I've got levels for these, so from 0 to 100%. And exactly the same on deck 2, reverb, delay, jet, and then levels for these. I've also got an overall filter for deck 1, so I can filter out a low pass filter for deck 1 and deck 2. And then I've got these release effects at the end, which is a released echo, so I can hold this down and it will echo the tune out for me. Now that's just the front panel of 2 pages. If I wanted to add more pages using the controller editor, I can do, but for now I think 2 pages is more than enough because I can just toggle between each 2. Now let's move down to the pads. Now these pads are set out as close as I could get to the Pioneer style pads within 16 per deck. So my groups here are what assign the deck that's in view. So group A is deck 1 and group B is deck 2. So now all of these pads on group A are deck 1 controlling. Group B, deck 2 controlling. So the top 8 are my hot cues. I've got hot cue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. Under here, my first 2 white pads are my memory cues. So wherever I've set memory cues for each track, so if I go back here, if on deck 1 I set a memory cue set point, I can navigate that set point with these two pads. I've got a memory forward and a memory back, so I can navigate my hot cues and navigate my cue points, my memory cues. To the right of that, I've got two green pads. Now these are my nudges. I don't have jog wheels on this because it's a Mark III machine. There's no actual jog wheels like you have on turntables. So to bypass that and to try and combat that, I've got a nudge forward and back. So I can nudge as if I'm sort of moving the platter of the turntable forward and back, a nice low resolution, so it's just like I'd be moving slightly the platter. And then lastly on the bottom, these four pink pads, these are used for auto loops. So I've got an 8-bar loop, a 16-bar loop, a 32-bar loop, and a 64-bar loop that I can call up whenever I want at any point within the track. These pads work exactly the same for deck 2 or on my group B, deck 2. But if I move over to my group C, this is now my sampler. And this will trigger the samples that I have loaded within my sampler here in the Rekordbox software. So for instance, here I've got a sub drop, I've got a crash, I've got another crash, and this is my personal favourite, the epic clappage from the F9 sample pack. Absolutely amazing. These are great for extra transitions and getting a little bit more life and excitement out of the mixes and transitions that you have between track to track. Lastly, on deck D, or group D, I have my pad effects. So now what these are is red for deck 1 and blue for deck 2. Now what these do is, whenever I hold the pad down, it will apply a certain effect to that deck, and the effects are filter LFOs, sweeps, flanges, transforms, and a range of echoes and reverbs. Now all I have to do is hold these down and it will apply that effect until I take my finger off the pad for that deck and that deck. So it's very straightforward and very simple. There's not a lot of navigation that has to go around in here. You just have to remember, if you're going to be controlling a deck, you need to make sure you are on the right deck. So up here, you can see clearly deck 1 is engaged, pads for deck 1. Deck 2 is engaged, pads for deck 2. Sampler engaged, it changes the colours, so I know I'm in, this is what my sampler looks like. And I know that's what my pad effects look like. So really, A and B, you just have to keep an eye out for these two. So that's enough talking. Let's get mixing. Let's see this in action. My rotary here on the machine selects from the browser. If I click left, it will assign that track to deck 1. If I click right, it will assign that track to deck 2 for me. I can decide at the top here if I want to sync these. So beat sync deck 1 and beat sync deck 2. I can decide which one is going to be the master and which one is going to be the slave. So I'm going to pick deck 1 to be the master. And let's have a play. So right, let's just go for it. We'll do a quick blend mix and then we'll conclude the video. So let's go. That concludes this video. For more information about using Maschine Mk3 as a controller for other softwares, go to www.proemp.co.uk. Also, click the link below this video and it will take you to the free stuff page on the website where you can download the mappings for Rekordbox and the mappings for Mk3. Thanks very much. My name's Shay and this is Pro EMP.